This is part 3 of the Introduction to Student Learning Outcomes presentation. This section revolves around performance measures. The general description of performance measures is that it identifies all performance measures, including name, purpose, type, and metric, which is the level of achievement. And in the general description, it articulates the administration and scoring details, including the reporting. Section 3 is based upon high-quality performance measures aligned to the targeted content standards. Let's explain that in further detail. Part 3A, it lists the name of each performance measure, and otherwise known as the test, the assessment, whatever the case may be. For example, in elementary school, we have what's called a MAPS test. At the middle school and high school, we would have our CDT tests. You could always obviously use PSSA scores. You could use progress monitoring scores. There's all kinds of different performance measures that we have out there. 3B would be the type. What type of performance measure? And they give you, I believe, a list which says, and select all that are applicable. Is it a district-designed assessment? Is it a nationally recognized standardized test like a MAPS or a CDT or a PSSA is one of those? Is it a student project? Is it a student portfolio? There are lots of options. 3C is the purpose. That's the who, what, and why. So the measurement data project. The data project is intended to measure student proficiency using appropriate tools to collect and interpret the data. 3D, the metric. That's telling us, what are we measuring? Do we want to measure the growth? So we're not necessarily mastering this topic, but we want to show a significant amount of growth on whatever your goal statement is. Or are we showing mastery? Have we reached the pinnacle of mastering this particular goal statement that you originally wrote? Or is it some combination of both? The administration frequency would be how many times are you going to assess? So, for example, CDT's MAP scores are 3 times a year. If you're using Keystones, it would be only once a year. If you're using thematic tests, maybe it's once a month. Progress monitoring could be once a week. So it really depends upon, again, what your goal statement is. There's lots of options here in terms of how often are you going to assess with this performance measure. The adaptations and accommodations, that would be for students with IEPs, ELL, gifted IEPs, whatever the case may be. You may need to put some accommodations in there or adaptations. 3G, resources and equipment. This gets more detailed, but an example would be if you were going to be using a CDT, which is the classroom diagnostics tool, you would need a computer lab. You would need the computers. If you were doing progress monitoring, maybe you would need AIMSweb. Everything down to something. If you're doing Dibbles, you would need the book. So those type of different resources that you may need. The scoring tools identifies the scoring tool for each performance measure. For objective measures, scoring keys and rubrics are identified. For subjective measures, the name of each scoring rubric and accompanying guidelines are listed. So an example would be an inventory scoring key from a book company assessment tool. So that would be how it's being scored. Online scores are obviously instantly sent out back from that company. Administration and scoring personnel. Who's gonna be scoring this? This is particularly important for things that are subjective, like a rubric. You'd want more than one person to be grading it, just to take out the subjectivity of the assessment. Then 3J, performance reporting, identifies the manner by which student performance on the performance measure is going to be communicated to others. Maybe a summary report of the data that you see, or something to that effect. How are you going to report through this data? So now let's take 10 minutes to complete section 3 of your mini project on the SLO. Remember, the main idea in section 3 is to consider how are you going to measure your student progress as it relates to your goal statement.